And we'll have our reading from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. We are on week 48, the law of karma, bondage or soul release. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The epistle of St. Paul to the Galatians contains this oft-quoted statement: "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa tells a story from the life of the Banari saint Trilanga Swami. The story goes on: a skeptic once determined to expose Trilanga as a charlatan. A large bucket of calcium lime mixture used in whitewashing walls was placed before the Swami. "Master," the materialist said, in mock reverence, "I have brought you some clabbered milk. Please drink it." Trilanga unhesitatingly drained to the last drop the container full of burning lime. In a few minutes, the evildoer fell to the ground in agony. "Help, Swami, help!" he cried. "I'm on fire. Forgive my wicked test." The great yogi broke his habitual silence. "Scoffer," he said, "you did not realize when you offered me poison that my life is one with your own. Except for my knowledge that God is present in my stomach, as in every atom of creation, the lime would have killed me. Now that you know the divine meaning of boomerang, never again play tricks on anyone." The well-purged sinner, healed by Trilanga's words, slunk feebly away. Yogananda goes on to say, the reversal of pain was not due to any volition of the master, but came about through unerring application of the law of justice, which upholds creation's farthest swinging orb. Men of God realization like Trilanga allow the divine law to operate instantaneously. They have banished forever all thwarting cross-currents of ego. Not by reason alone, but by self-realization are the ins and outs of destiny fully understood. Their web, though tied forever to the post of ego motivation, is too intricate to be perceived as a single thread. Only great masters can see it with clarity. It is visible to them in all its workings, not from within the tangle, but from above, in superconsciousness. As Sri Krishna said in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he who beholds inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. He is one with spirit. He has attained the true goal of action, perfect freedom. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here with all of you. I'm Erin, for those of you who might not know me, and I live here at Ananda Village, but I'm originally from Rhode Island and had my spiritual childhood, you could say, at Ananda, Rhode Island. So it's wonderful to be able to tune in and reconnect with you in this way. So I'm going to start with a reading from Whispers from Eternity, Yogananda's book of poems and prayer demands. And this is a demand not to be enslaved by the ego or by ego-centered passivity. I want to use my own will, but guide it ever, Father, toward the golden paradise of all fulfillment. For I would be infinity's smiling child, confident of being imprisoned no longer behind bars of fruitless desire and withered hopes. I would break the shameful cords of lethargy that have presumed to hold me and step fearlessly into freedom. Released, I now blaze my way through forests of every limitation and illusion. Oh, my little vain ego may strut proudly, saying, "Behold my glory, worship me." But I will look through its transparent form and behold thine unimaginable beauty, clothed in the subtle form of the whole universe. The silence-tuned hearing of my soul will ignore the tiny boasting masquerader, my little self impersonating thee, and will listen rapturously to the wind-borne fragrant music of thine own matchless voice whispering across the ages, I am he. So Yogananda said that the motivation behind all our actions is to avoid pain and experience happiness. So even that man who brought that poison to Trilangaswami, he was only in his own ignorant way trying to find some happiness, some freedom, and he thought that's the way that he would find it. And we all do this, don't we? Just as in that song that Duty sang of Swami Kriyananda's, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it out there. Each verse is so instructive. And how often we go seeking our happiness and our freedom outside of ourselves. But the beautiful thing is that we have karma. And it's not a punishment, as many people think. Karma is just action. And so for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so karma is just simply a natural consequence of our actions that helps us to learn. It's the divine law. And it helps us to learn from our experiences where true happiness lies. There's a funny story that Yogananda told about a man who loved God very much, but had a few desires left. And so when he passed, an angel came to him and asked, "What is it that you still would like?" And the man said, "Well, I've always been sick and weak. And so in my next life, I'd like to have a strong body, strong and healthy." And so he reincarnated and he had a strong, healthy body, but he was too poor to feed himself well. So at the end of that life, the angel came to him and asked, "What more do you want?" And he said, "Well, I'd like a strong, healthy body, but also a healthy bank account." And so he reincarnates and he is strong and healthy and wealthy. But after a while, he gets sad because he doesn't have anyone to share it with. So at the end of his life, the angel comes and asks again, "What more do you want?" And he says, "I want a healthy body, I want to be wealthy, and I want to have a beautiful, good woman for a wife." So he reincarnates, he gets everything he wants, but unfortunately, his wife dies prematurely, and he spends the rest of his life in absolute despair, mourning her loss. And so at the end of this life, the angel comes to him again and says, "What else?" And he says, "I want to be healthy and wealthy and have a good wife, and I want her to live a long time." And the angel says, "Are you sure that's everything?" And he said, "Yes, that's everything." And so he reincarnates, he gets everything that he asks for, everything that he desires. But as his life goes on, it seems that his wife is living a little too long. And he starts to be interested in his young secretary, to the point where he leaves his wife for this young woman. But the young woman only wanted him for his money. And so she took his money and ran away with someone else. And so at the end of this life, the angel comes to him and says, "What else?" And finally, the man says, "Nothing, nothing else. I see that for every fulfillment, there's a catch. The only thing I want is God." And so this is the lesson that karma teaches us. We can have our desires, we can act, we can look for our happiness outside of ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that, really. but there will be a natural consequence that will guide us back. Swami Kriyananda said that karma is an expression of divine love. And why is that? Because we have our free will to act. God gives us our free will to act and the ability to learn from those actions and ultimately be guided back home to true happiness, to not just get lost in those actions again and again and again, but eventually really to learn from them. In Education for Life, which was written by Swami Kriyananda, and it's essentially the application of the principles of self-realization to education, he dedicates a whole chapter to the importance of learning through experience. This is a very core piece of Education for Life. And why is that? We can't learn from theory alone. Theory might expand our thinking, but it doesn't necessarily change our behavior. It's only through our own direct experience that we change the way that we act. When we have an experience of joy or of peace, we're motivated. What caused that? How did I get there? And we think about how we acted to get to that place. And same in sorrow or in despair. Those experiences teach us. It might take a while for us to start to make those connections between our own actions and how the experiences that we have, but eventually we do get there. And that is the law of karma. Yogananda said that sorrow is the greatest teacher if you learn from it, and it's the greatest curse if you don't learn from it. So how do we learn from our karma and not be bound by it? Well, the trick is that we're not really bound by karma, we're bound by our ego. Yogananda defined the ego as the soul identified with the body. And it's in that identification, in that attachment to this body, this job, this relationship, this house, this experience, in that identification that this is me, that's where we get bound, not in the actions themselves or the reactions even. Yogananda once met Ramana Maharshi, a great Indian saint, and he asked him, why should there be suffering? And Ramana Maharshi said, who suffers? Who suffers? Not the soul, only the ego, only the little self who is thinking of I and me and mine, who is identified with this job or this relationship. That's the one who suffers. And so the Bhagavad Gita encourages us not to refrain from action. We might think, okay, that's it. I don't want to have any more karma, so I'm just not going to act. Because every time I act, there's a reaction. But that's not going to get us to freedom. The way to freedom is to act with inner freedom. Not in ego consciousness, but from soul consciousness. So identifying more with who we really are in spirit, and not with this outward life and this outward experience, but going within and identifying with who we really are. There's going to be ups and downs in life, no matter what. But if we can hold that awareness of who and what we really are, we're free, no matter what happens. There's a beautiful example. Swami Kriyananda, in his life, there are many, many examples of this. He had so many illnesses and physical karmas, and so many things happened to him, and always he maintained that sense of inner freedom, never being identified by it. But I heard a story recently that I'd never heard before that was a perfect example of the law of karma. And he said he had always wanted a motorhome, and just, to be able to drive around the country and, just teach and share with people and have his little home with him. And so he finally got the motorhome, and he was sitting in it, and he said he was just overcome with joy and just laughing his head off. And he knew that there would be a consequence. And he said, okay, well, let's just see what it's going to be. he couldn't help himself. He was just overjoyed, but also, a little attached. But he acknowledged that. He said, I wonder what the consequence will be. Well, later that day, the driver of the motorhome parked it in a parking lot of a supermarket and walked into the back to get something, not realizing that it was still in gear. And so the motorhome started to roll very slowly. They couldn't even tell it was moving. But at that moment, Swami was reaching up into a cupboard. And a moment later, the motorhome hit the set of the supermarket. The supermarket was fine, the motorhome was fine, but Swami fell and broke his finger. And he said he laughed just as hard because he saw the law of karma at work. And he was so happy to see that it was working. But deeper than that, you see that he didn't suffer in that because he wasn't attached to his body. He wasn't really attached to the motorhome. He was perfectly free inside. And it's in that inner freedom that karma can play itself out, and we don't necessarily need to be bound by it. We don't necessarily need to suffer through the experience if we have that inner freedom. So it's not in the action of karma itself, but in the consciousness that we hold that either binds us or frees us. So how do we practice this inner freedom? How do we cultivate this? Well, we start in meditation, right? We're withdrawing our senses from outward involvement, and we start to identify more with spirit. And instead of thinking of ourselves and I and me and mine, we start to go within and we start to cultivate that awareness. I am He. I am He. Blessed Spirit, I am He. Yogananda said, in soul consciousness, we are no longer helplessly controlled by habits and desires. To the extent then that we develop soul consciousness, we free ourselves from karmic slavery. We can be free even as karma acts in our lives. We can be inwardly free in that awareness of God within, of that awareness of who we really are, in that non-attachment. All the practices of the path of Kriya Yoga help to cultivate this awareness. We practice Hong Sa. What is that? I am spirit. I am spirit. We practice the energization exercises. We're not identifying with the body. We're not really moving the body. We're moving the energy. We're saying, I am energy, right? In the Om technique, we're communing, we're connecting with that inner vibration. I am Om. I'm not this little body. I'm the cosmic Om. I'm the cosmic sound, that infinite sound. And in Kriya, going within, going into the spine and experiencing bliss, experiencing yourself as joy, not as the little body, not as the ego. In the scriptures, Yogananda mentions in Autobiography of a Yogi that in the scriptures it says it takes 1,000,000 years of right living to prepare the brain to experience cosmic consciousness, to really experience that, that I am spirit. But we have the tool of Kriya Yoga. It's a shortcut. Because what is Kriya? Kriya comes from the same root in Sanskrit as karma, from Kri, which means it's just action, to do. But Kriya is an inner action, not an outer action. It's roasting the seeds of karma before they can even sprout, before they can even come to life. So we burn up that karma. We don't have to act it out. Through Kriya, we can eliminate some of those seeds of karma and speed up the process. What a great blessing that is. So the question is, though, how do we act? Because we still have to act in our lives. We can't always be meditating, much as we might like to run away from the world at times. We do have to act in this world. So how do we do that? And the Bhagavad Gita reading today gives us the instructions that we need. Action in inaction, and inaction in action. Now, I've heard this many times. It's a bit of a tongue twister, and I've never truly understood it. But as I was thinking about it more and more, it's the essence of it is really what Yogananda said, to be calmly active and actively calm, right? So that in meditation, we're outwardly still, but there's this inward movement of energy and of consciousness. There's action in that outward inaction stillness. And in our lives, in our outward activity, we maintain an inward stillness, a centeredness, a connection to that inner stillness through everything that we do. So we try to bring our stillness of meditation into our life, into our activities. Yogananda gave us the prayer, I will reason, I will, and I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing in all things. And that's the essence of it. We have to act in this world. We can't get out of it. But we can ask for ourselves to be guided by spirit, to be guided by God in everything that we do, and to keep that essence of spirit moving within as we act outwardly in this world. This is the essence of selfless service, of seva. We're acting, but we're doing it not for ourselves. We're not working because we're trying to get a bunch of money, or we're trying to be really successful and want everyone to praise us or have a lot of power. We're doing it for God. And anything you do, whatever your job is, you can do it for God just by remembering that everyone and everything is God. We start to expand our awareness. We feel that presence of God within us, and then we see it outside of us, all around us. Swami, again, is a beautiful example of this God remembrance, of doing everything for God, with God, and by the grace of God. Someone once asked him, of all the things you've accomplished, of what are you most proud? And Swami accomplished a lot in this world. Hundreds of songs, hundreds of books, traveling all around the world, starting communities. I could go on and on and on. Outwardly, he accomplished a great deal. And so someone asked, what are you most proud of? And he said, I don't feel I've accomplished anything. God is the doer. I don't feel I've accomplished anything. God is the doer. What a consciousness to be in. And that's the way to be free from karma, to act without desire for the fruits of those actions, nishkam karma, right? To be totally inwardly free. It's God that's doing it through me. It's all God. And as we practice through meditation, through our service, we start to expand this understanding of who we really are, that we're not this little body. It's not this little life. Oh, this is happening to me. And why is this person doing this? It's not about that. There's a way bigger picture going on. It's all God. And we get that sense of, that expanded sense of ourselves and of God's presence. So as Trailanga Swami said, you did not realize when you offered me poison that my life is one with your own. I've heard this story a lot and I never noticed that part of what he said. That really transcending karma is that awareness, is expanding that awareness that when I act, it's not in a bubble, right? It's not removed from the rest of the world and from the people around me, and that my actions have an effect. And when we start to expand that awareness, we start to change how we act. I see this as the lesson of living in community. When we come together in community, we see the way that our actions affect each other. And we can't escape that the way that we might be able to do on the world. And that's the gift of these communities that we have in Rhode Island and here in the village and all over the world, these little coming together, these little world brotherhood communities that Master and Swami have started. It's a gift because when we see the effect we have on each other. We want to live in harmony. And when we live in harmony, what is harmony? It's living in attunement. And when we live in attunement, we're free. When we live in tune with spirit, not with our little self, but with our higher self, then we can be free. Swami Kriyananda said, we can never act apart from the Lord, nor can we act apart from his cosmic law. Our duty to him, to the universe, and also to ourselves is to contribute to the overall harmony and beauty of his creation and to the well-being of his creatures. So we're here to act, but we're not here to act for ourselves. We're here to act in God remembrance and remembrance of who and what we really are, channels for that light. So whether in meditation, whether in acting in life, rest in God, live in God. And remember who's really acting, who's really doing. God alone. God alone. Thank you.